The disappearance of the Jamison family is still considered one of the most mysterious cases in the history of U.S. law enforcement agencies. Today, we will tell you why the fate of Bobby, Sherilyn, and their daughter Madison, who disappeared in October 2009, stirred the minds of millions of Americans. Spouses Bobby and Sherilyn Jamison, along with their daughter Madison, lived for several years in a small house in the city of Eufaula in Oklahoma. In 2009, they seriously considered buying a plot of land measuring 40 acres, approximately 16 hectares. As it turned out later, the family wanted to leave their home and build a ranch away from civilization. The most attractive to the spouses seemed to be a plot 40 kilometers from their hometown. The broker involved in the sale of the land offered Bobby and Sherilyn to inspect their future possessions together, but they refused and decided to make a small reconnaissance voyage on their own. Shortly before the fateful date of October 7, 2009, the couple looked around a little and talked with one of the local farmers. On October 8, Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison loaded everything they needed into their small white pickup truck, not forgetting the girl's pet, a black and white dog named Maisie, and went to explore the neighborhood around the plot for a new house. However, they never returned from this journey. The Jamison family was last seen in the vicinity of the small settlement of Red Oak. Bobby and Sherilyn didn't tell their neighbors how long they were going to be away. Perhaps if the statement about the disappearance of the spouses and their little daughter had appeared to the police earlier, the story would have had a completely different ending. However, as we know, real life does not tolerate the subjunctive mood. The first guesses that something had happened to Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison appeared to their neighbors and police officers only after October 17. Through the windows, bystanders examined things thrown in a hurry and a small emaciated black and white dog. Fearing for the unfortunate animal, the hunters called the police, who released the dog and later established that the car belongs to the Jamison family. Hunters and law enforcement officials rushed to rescue the dog, which by that time had almost no signs of life. It was clear that for several days the animal was in the car without food and water. The dog was able to survive only thanks to the local climate. Due to strong temperature fluctuations, condensation formed on the inside of the car windows, which saved from complete dehydration. As soon as the dog was handed over to specialists, the police began to wonder where the owners of the car had gone and why they had doomed their own pet to certain death. At first, investigators assumed that the car could have simply been stolen, but later it became clear that this version was erroneous. During the inspection, rainwater, garbage, tin cans, and it is unclear from where and why, were found in the back of the car, the big cobblestones that have taken hold. Chaos reigned inside the car. Its culprit, however, could be a dog. Another surprise was waiting for the police under the driver's seat. There they found a package containing $32,000, which was a huge amount for the local population. All these clues led investigators to the idea that there was no hijacking. After all, even if we imagine that the attackers did not find the package with the banknotes, they probably would have tried to take away what was in sight: the phones and wallets of the spouses. The police could not get rid of the idea that the Jamisons themselves had come to the area and then left the car for a while, being firmly convinced that they would soon return to it. Most likely, the couple and their daughter wanted to explore the neighborhood, so they left the pet alone in the car. During the walk, apparently, something happened that made the family unable to return back. According to another version, the family was forcibly taken away. But it is important to clarify here that no traces of a struggle were found near the vehicle. In any case, the police had serious reasons to suspect that something terrible had happened to the Jamisons. The county sheriff also drew attention to the strange location of the car. The family's pickup truck was standing on the road a little askew. From the outside, it might seem that another vehicle or an impressive obstacle blocked the car's path, which disappeared later. After comparing all the information received, the police decided that it was necessary to throw all resources into the search for the missing family as soon as possible. 300 people joined the search, including commissars, forestry workers, child advocates, and local residents, as well as more than 15 specially trained dogs, a police helicopter, and several drones. However, even with such forces, it turned out to be much more difficult to cope with combing the relief forest area than it seemed at first. Almost immediately after the search began, the weather in Oklahoma began to deteriorate. Heavy rains were replaced by fine and annoying rain, and a strong wind worsened visibility and slowed down the progress of volunteers deep into the forest. At first it seemed that the dogs had picked up the Jamison trail after all, but eventually led the dog handlers to a long-abandoned rainwater tank. Of course, the tank was drained immediately, but no traces of any of the missing people were found there. Soon, most of the search engines were recalled to their usual duty stations. The dogs were also useless due to the numerous rains. In addition, the hunting season began, because of which every person put himself at risk of being accidentally wounded from a gun. It was decided to stop mass search activities. Thus, the police hoped to find at least some clues that could lead them to the answer to the main question: what happened to Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison? However, this, contrary to expectations, did not bring the investigators closer to finding the family. On the contrary, detectives have even more questions. The police were surprised to find that there were no traces of strangers in the car, no blood, no other people's fingerprints. The investigators also pinned hope on the phones of the spouses, in which GPS could be turned on. Thanks to Bobby's smartphone, it turned out that before parking, he and his family drove around the neighborhood quite aimlessly. After the couple went for a walk with their daughter. Against the background of beautiful boulders, the parents decided to take a picture of baby Madison. Then they did not expect that this picture would fly all over the American media. Many saw fear and despair in the girl's eyes, while others said that she simply did not want to pose. The examination showed that the paint in the Jamison's car fully corresponded to the one with which the strange recordings were made. The police came to the conclusion that most likely, Sherilyn used the can. Even then, it seemed strange to detectives that a 40-year-old woman almost always carried paint with her. Police later found similar inscriptions on a large metal container in the yard of the Jamison house. One of the phrases was by no means religious. People have already killed 3 black cats in the neighborhood. Witches don't like it when black cats are killed. That's when the police decided to find out more about the past of a woman interested in witches. Then another strange find appeared: spray cans of graffiti paint lying in a sports bag. They made the police remember that there was an unattended old and dented Ford car not far from the abandoned pickup truck. Like many, Sherilyn Jamison has accumulated a lot of skeletons in the closet. Some secrets were sad, others were simply frightening. But about everything in order. After school, another young girl graduated from cosmetology courses and managed to work in a beauty salon. By the age of 25, Sherilyn married Billy Mangum and gave birth to a son, Colton. However, just 3 years after the wedding, the couple quietly and peacefully filed for divorce. The reason for this decision, the investigators have not been able to find out. It was only in 2002 that the woman met her future second husband, Bobby Jamison. Almost immediately, the lovers moved in together, and a year later their common daughter, Madison, was born. After that, the young parents legalized their relationship. The man did not work anywhere and regularly consumed alcoholic beverages, money for which he was usually lent by relatives. This time Brent decided that his sister should lend him a bottle. It is unknown exactly how Sherilyn managed to get rid of a relative, but after this incident, their relationship became even more tense. At first, the police thought that the woman's brother might well be guilty of the Jamisons' disappearance, but his iron alibi forced investigators to dig further. After an unpleasant meeting with a relative, Sherilyn began to notice atypical mood swings for her. Bouts of aggression were followed by periods of severe depression. Sometimes the woman refused to leave the room for several days, complaining of apathy, lack of strength, and regular headaches. At that moment, Sherilyn decided to start a diary with which she shared her innermost thoughts. For the most part, these records contained grievances against the household, but especially against Bobby's husband. Jamison began to get tired of his wife's regular mood swings. Periodically, he reproached her for feigning apathy in order not to perform household duties. The relationship between the spouses worsened every day. All this was compounded by financial problems. Like many other Americans, Sherilyn and Bobby lived on credit. They took out a mortgage on the house even before the birth of Madison's daughter. It is quite possible that this is why the couple wanted to move to a cheap ranch. The sudden death of Marla's sister in 2007 was a real blow for Sherilyn. A young woman died from a bee sting. She had a severe allergy to their venom. After that, Sherilyn's depression took on threatening proportions. Relatives began to insist on urgent treatment and almost forcibly tried to force her to take medication. Sherilyn's mother noted that she often frightened her with the illogicality of her actions. For example, she could demand to be urgently escorted somewhere by car, and halfway along the way, she would start escorting the woman out of the car. Bobby Jamison's mother also described the daughter-in-law's illness. According to her, Sherilyn regularly fell into a state of aggression, spoke quickly, refused to compromise, and was simply unbearable. As a result, the relatives quarreled, and the mother-in-law left home in her hearts. Sherilyn Colton's 14-year-old son also lived with his mother, but could hardly tolerate her mood swings, so he eventually moved in with his father. To say that the young man's decision angered the woman is to say nothing. After all these hardships, the woman decided to buy a small .22 caliber pistol for self-defense and also hit religion and even the occult. Soon Bobby began to share her beliefs. The Jamisons have repeatedly told the local pastor about the noise that comes from the roof of their house, believing that otherworldly entities are to blame for everything. Information about the strange beliefs of the family quickly spread in the media, giving rise to another version of their disappearance. Sherilyn's mother claimed for a long time that her daughter, granddaughter, and son-in-law were treated by some occult group. The police did not attach too much importance to the words of the mother of the disappeared. They, of course, conducted a thorough check, but having found no traces of the group in question, they were not surprised. In their opinion, the fascination with mysticism, religion, and the occult was explained by the difficult situation and serious psychological problems experienced by both spouses. Another suspect appeared to the police when they found out that shortly before her disappearance, Sherilyn still managed to use a gun in an altercation with a handyman, Kenneth Bello. He lived in the Jamison house and helped them cope with the consequences of the fire that happened in December 2007. The man was quite harsh in his judgments and had an extremely negative attitude towards the indigenous population of America, the Indians. Sherilyn could not tolerate constant racist remarks for a long time, because she herself had Indian blood. Tired, the woman took a gun and tried to kick Kenneth out, but he was sure that Sherilyn would not dare to use a weapon. However, Sherilyn still shot into the ground near Bello's feet, forcing him to retreat. The police decided that the man might want revenge and turned to the FBI for help. About 2 months passed before the investigators still managed to interrogate Kenneth. They even made him take a polygraph test. However, this version also crumbled to dust. It became clear that on the day of the couple's disappearance, Bello was several hundred kilometers away from them and did not leave his new home. However, not only Sherilyn had secrets that she diligently hid from neighbors and even her husband. The police were interested in the story of Bobby's relationship with his father, Bob Dean. Less than a year before his disappearance, Jamison Jr. claimed that Dad wanted to kill his entire family. Allegedly, a man deliberately hit him and his wife with a car to injure them, although Bob claimed that he had hit them by accident. Dean's lawyers insisted that the case be settled before the trial, and he reimbursed his son and his wife $64,000. Perhaps half of this amount was in the couple's car on the day of their disappearance. However, even such an impressive amount of money was not enough for the couple for long. A few months later, Bobby went to court again and said that since childhood, he had been working for free at his father's gas station in Oklahoma. There was allegedly an agreement between the relatives that Bob Dean would eventually give his son half of the proceeds after the sale. However, he did not receive a penny. Soon after that, the couple disappeared and, accordingly, could no longer defend their interests in court. However, 2 months after the disappearance of Sherilyn, Bobby, and Madison, Bob Dean died in the hospital from a heart attack. At first, detectives seized on the version that the father had arranged the disappearance of his son and daughter-in-law. Only he could benefit from it from a financial point of view. However, even the traceable motive of the crime did not give a definitive answer. Detectives found out that Bob Dean's Alzheimer's disease had progressed in recent years. There was no evidence that he ordered the murder of the family. Besides, the man doted on his own granddaughter Madison. It was her he made the main heiress of his $500,000 fortune. When all the possible versions that the police were considering were rejected, the sheriff issued an announcement that they were powerless to find out what happened to the Jamisons. For 4 long years, the investigation was stomping on the spot. However, many believed that Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison were safe and sound and would even be able to return home one day. This was not meant to happen. On November 15, 2013, a hunter, whose name is unknown, contacted the police with a statement that he had found a human skull in the forest. The investigators who left found the remains of 3 people lying face down next to each other on the spot. Their bodies have undergone deep decomposition over the years. However, thanks to DNA examination and examination of dental records, criminologists concluded that the remains belonged to the Jamison family. Experts could not determine the cause of the death of the spouses, and the police refused to publish the results of the autopsy, leaving journalists and local residents space for imagination. That is, the search engines probably passed where the corpses of Jamison family members lay, but for unknown reasons they never found them. Anyway, the case of the missing Jamison family remained unsolved.